Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hi, I'm Jason Powers. I am Chief Medical Officer of Positive Recovery Center and creator of Positive Recovery. Today is Friday, May 1st, 2020, and we've got a really special interview today with George Joseph. He is a longtime friend of mine, so on one level, it's a little bit strange interviewing him because I know the answers to most of the questions I'm going to be asking. But he actually has been in the recovery industry for a very long time. He's an amazing person. When I think of PERMA, each of the buckets of positivity, engagement, relationship, meaning, or achievement, there's not one I don't think of George Joseph for. And hopefully I'll highlight that as we go through his story. But first, just sort of the highlight of the news for this week would be that today, Governor Abbott lifted quarantine for Texas. As just so happens, for the next couple weeks, as long as there's a plateau in new cases, or ratio of positive tests to overall tests, then we're at 25% of retail stores. And in a couple weeks, we'll be at 50%. And hopefully we're going to keep moving in that direction. The aftermath of COVID obviously is going to keep rippling for a while. So I do think it's appropriate that we continue to go over topics such as dealing with the stress and how to be resilient and community and the other things that we talked about last podcast. So without further ado, George, how are you?
I'm well, Doc. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Of course. Welcome. So tell us what you do for every one of your empires.
Well, basically, it's two things that my primary focus is. CEO of Positive Recovery Centers, a drug and alcohol multi-dimensional company from detox, which you're obviously the chief medical officer of, and inpatient, day treatment, intensive outpatient, sober living, aftercare, and more of the managed care model. We're a preferred provider of United Healthcare, Aetna, Blue Cross, and most other insurance companies. The second thing I do is Common Bond Bistro, Bakery, and Brasserie. It's 3 restaurants that are here in Houston, with 3 are about to open in the next 3 months. So I don't know if I'm going to be very sane in the next 3 months with all the pandemic and trying to open 3 restaurants in this environment.
I know that just speaks to your optimism and your sort of your courage,
Oh, poor timing.
Yeah. Well, and I also forgot to sort of have the caveat for our listeners and anybody watching this that we're doing this during the quarantine and we're doing this on Zoom, which I think everybody in the world is currently using. So the little bit of lag, not enough to start over, but the little bit of lag you're going to have to forgive. And we're just doing the best we can with what we got. Yeah. So why don't you tell us where you grew up and what type of family and how many siblings and that type of thing? Just give us a little bit of background.
Sure. I'm the youngest of 6 in deep South Louisiana, a town called Lockport. Population 2,500.
What parish?
And Lafourche.
I just love hearing that. It's like eating bibimbap. I ordered because I like saying it. I love it. Okay, keep going.
Lafourche Parish. I'm the youngest of 6. I was 5 years after my last brother. So I think I was probably a mistake, and I'm glad I made the cut.
And so what did your dad do for a living? What did your mom work in the home or out of the home?
It's funny. My mom stopped high school when she was like in 9th grade to take care of a sick grandmother of hers. And my father was second generation. I guess my grandfather came from Lebanon. And then he sold cars, was his livelihood. And my mom was a homemaker. And the unfortunate thing in my life is that my dad had a heart attack when I was 12, and my mom, to her credit, she went and got a GED, and she got her first job as a sitter working at a hospital in the evenings. And then they gave her the PBX job at this small hospital in our area. And then one of my brother's friends was a dentist, and she eventually became a dental assistant. And so I was very proud of her. She's 94 years old. She just tested negative in her nursing home.
Great.
There was a lot of positive tests in that nursing home. So we're very grateful. We just found out yesterday.
Yeah, I think 40% of all tests are in nursing homes. And just for our listeners, what does PBX stand for?
Like the digital operator. It's like, hello, thanks for calling. And you got to plug it. In the old days, I think they had to plug it in, like room number, this one and that one. So
like Lily Tomlin, right? With all her
like this was probably in the 70s.
So so it sounds like your mom dropping out of high school to take care of a sick relative. That's maybe where you get your strong sense of family and community comes from. I didn't know that, but I do remember you telling me a funny story about like when your dad was working, it was before he passed away. And like, if there was a salesman that would come to the house, he could sell your mom anything. And your dad came home one day and was like, really just, honey, you would buy shit, excuse my language. I think I can say that on a podcast. Yeah. And sure enough, one day he came home and a manure salesman.
Front yard was full of manure fertilizer. So she did buy it.
That's great. So you were in high school in Lafourche Parish, right? Did you play organized sports? Was that a big part of your life?
Yeah, I love it. My first addiction was basketball. Yeah. It was my number one sport. And I played in 7th grade. And then unfortunately in my 7th grade year, or in the beginning of my 8th grade year, I broke my leg playing football, not organized football, just football in the front yard. And I broke my femur. And then I missed that 8th grade basketball season. And then the 8th grade, toward the end of the year, we were doing physical fitness with athletes. And I was not supposed to have any kind of contact sport. And my coach said, hey, we're playing flag football. We'd lift weights 3 days a week, and they were playing flag football. And I would just walk around the track, and they're like, come on, you play, let's play. And it was a bad decision. I don't know if it was that day or what day it was, but I went up for a pass and got hit by a guy and broke my leg again. And back in those days, a femur would be 6 weeks in a hospital in traction. So I was 6 weeks again the second time, and that threw out my 9th grade year. And so that's when the drugs took over and drinking, and it was kind of a snowball effect going negatively downhill.
Yeah. Didn't you say that part of how you coped with losing your father was maybe tuning out with drugs?
I think it all was a combination. I don't know if, if he'd have been alive, would I still been an addict? Yeah, absolutely. I would have been an addict. I don't think that happens. I think what happens is that, when you don't know how to handle your feelings, it's like fuel to the fire.
It's speed adjust.
Yeah. Just lit a fire that was stronger. And then losing basketball was another part of the fire because it was more grief. And in that time, our age group, my friends were all experimenting and getting involved in it. And I think when you have the genetic predisposition, you become addicted. And I don't know what age, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, what age I crossed that line to addiction, but it took control of my life. And even though I had consequences, I continued to use. And even after then in my junior year, I was in a serious car accident. My friend was driving, and he was under the influence of Quaaludes, were really big back then. And we were at the time it was called the Sauce Piquant Festival, which is a turtle soup. In Louisiana, they had festivals for all kinds of things. They named festivals for anything, just to have a reason to raise money for the church and for people to get drunk and wasted. So we were driving, left the festival to go pick up a friend, and he passed up the house. And when we were turning around to come back, he ran into the ditch. In Louisiana, where I lived, they had basically the highway, a ditch, and then the bayou. And so we ended up going in the ditch, and I messed up 3 vertebrates. And so again, there was more issues. But even that one, I had 3 or 4 or 5 different surgeries. And I remember one surgery where I wanted to not do drugs, and how just miserable I was. And, so when looking back, you could see where, for an addict without drugs or alcohol, if he's not spiritually content, he becomes unhappy. And I was totally unhappy. Took out a lot of my aggression and negative feelings on my mom, who was trying to be my caretaker. And so I don't know what made me think of that, but it's just important to talk about that aspect of addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my son, who is not an addict, loves sports too. Just like you, broke his femur on the first game that he was able to play in tackle football, and had to sit out basketball season. And kids are kids. He took it out on me, and a bad word from him sends me. It's like horrible when your kid does that. I'm sure your mom understood, but it's so hard when you're young, right? And like, what's going on, making sense. Did you only use, or did you maybe take it to the next level with drugs? How were you involved with drugs besides just simply using in high school?
Well, I think I started to deal drugs to help support my habit.
And what happened? Were you successful? What happened?
I wasn't very successful. I'm sure I was successful a period of time because I would use my drugs. But one of my friends just out of high school introduced me to a friend of his to sell him some cocaine. And that friend happened to be a federal narcotics agent.
Wah, wah.
And so I was arrested in the summer between high school and college.
Yeah, and that was I think the hallmark characteristic I knew about George Joseph was that he was somebody in recovery that had got sober, then went to jail. Usually it's the other way around. People have negative consequences, they're in jail, they think about like, okay, this is like the worst thing I'm going to get. Well, George got sober, and then there was like a delayed.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So basically I was arrested in August. My lawyer recommended rehab in October. I went to rehab for 6 weeks, 6 months in a sober living. And during my rehab, actually the day before Thanksgiving, I went to court for my sentencing. And basically what happened is the beginning of the morning, and this was in Thibodaux, Louisiana, the court was full. In the afternoon, it was just me after lunch. And so I was really concerned, and they got me in a room and they said, listen, we want you to help us get your contacts in New Orleans. And I was so afraid. I'm like, yes, I'll do it, whatever. I just don't want to go to prison. They were like, you're going to go to Angola, which is our state penitentiary in Louisiana. I'm just turned 19. I'm frightened as could be. I weigh about 120 pounds. I mean, it was a bad situation. And fortunately, I went back to rehab that night, and the next day was Thanksgiving Day. And the counselor, which now they don't like to work during holidays, but thank God my counselor worked that day. And she talked to me, and she really helped me to understand the importance of finishing my recovery, not putting myself in that lifestyle, because I wasn't fully committed to recovery at that point. I was in partly wanting recovery, but partly just trying to not be in trouble. And she really it was a spiritual experience, because she said, whatever she told me that day made a lot of sense. And I said, yeah, I'll take my chances. And if I have to go to jail, I have to go to jail. And so I finished my rehab. I went to my sober living. And at the end of my sober living, I had to go do a year sentence. And it wasn't bad. It was in like a Mayberry RFD jail. It was work release. And really, after about 2 months, there were so many people on my behalf calling the sheriff, calling the judge, that they released me. So I was released 10 months early, and in which, I'm so grateful. And the thing about being in jail when you're sober is that you really get the comprehension of losing your freedom. Kind of like we're dealing with in this virus. You lose your freedom, and you don't realize how free you are until you lose your freedom, and how grateful you are. And so I think it was a turning point for me in my life to be more of service after being locked up. Not to say I wouldn't have been of service before that, but to devote my life to be more of service. Because when I was in my sober living, the counselors actually called me in their office one day and said, hey, we want you to read this book on becoming a counselor. And I listened, because I was facing jail time. And then I went upstairs and told the guys, I said, man, these guys are really hard up for help, because they want me to read this book on becoming a counselor. I said, I see the kind of cars they drive, and the BS they put up with. And I said, there's no way I'm going to do that. And ended up where I became a counselor. I got a license and became a drug and alcohol counselor many years later.
Yeah, like sort of like that counselor that worked on Thanksgiving that told you something right now you can't remember. Just for the listeners, I've been with you enough times where there are people in recovery with from like no time to decades that are going to you and asking for your help. And I know that gift you're paying forward for because I see you take it very seriously. Like case in point, Dan D, well, a good friend of ours, was struggling with something. And you and I think we were driving back from the airport during one trip, and you were brainstorming with me on how to help him and work through the steps. And here's somebody, you had almost 30 years at the time, sober, sponsored probably, I don't know, 1,000 people. And you were helping this guy so seriously. And it touched me. It like really motivated me. So if that counselor had an influence on you, you have an influence on me, and I'm sure other people. That's just amazing. So just so the listeners know, maybe they're not familiar so much with the workings of the addiction space. Like when George started out, he started out at the level of, say, a medical assistant, an MA. Not that they're like the lowest on the totem pole, but basically you don't need a graduate degree for. And what was it called back then when you started?
We were called a substance abuse tech.
Okay, so substance abuse tech. I mean, I don't think anybody gets paid lower. There you start. And you kind of like walk us through how you moved up because, it's public knowledge, but now, you sold Right Step to Elements and did pretty well for a Lafourche Parish drug, right?
Not too bad. Yeah, so basically when I finished my sober living, I did my jail time, and then they hired me as the substance abuse technician. And so I'd come in like at 10 o'clock at night and leave at like 8 in the morning and relieve the counselors, and then come in and work the weekends. And I was getting like $2 and something an hour. I was like below minimum wage. And in fact, one of the other techs many years later reported the recovery program for not paying minimum wage. So everybody got paid back to make it minimum wage. Unfortunately, I was past the 2-year window, so I didn't get any of that cash. But it was such a great experience because at a lower level in addiction, if you're working in a facility and you're at a lower level and you gain the respect of the people that are in the program, that's
you know what you're doing.
What you're doing. And so every time you get a promotion or move up a level, it's even easier because patients intuitively know which people can give them privileges. And so they act differently. You always hear the saying, like the real patients come out at night because all the main staff's going during the day. They're leaving from the day to the evening. So for me to work evenings, to work with these guys, I'm young. I'm in my 20s. Some of the guys were probably double my age, triple my age. And so for them to give me the respect and to listen. And, one of the things the counselor said in that meeting, telling me about me becoming a counselor, was that I had a way to confront people without getting them defensive. And so I think that's God-given. I don't think I've learned that. That's just, it's just a natural ability where you can tell people the truth without offending them, where some people could say the same thing and people get defensive and don't hear what they need to hear.
Right. Absolutely.
So I was kind of blessed with that. And so one of the things that happened when I was working as a substance abuse tech was that they hired this counselor from Wisconsin, and he said, I was applying for counselor training programs and one in Minnesota. And I didn't really want to go to Minnesota because I don't particularly like the cold. And he said, look, my trainer is actually starting a program in Houston, Texas for counselor training. Would you be interested in me, giving you information or talking to her about you? And I'm saying, absolutely. And so in 1983, I ended up in Houston for a 1-year counselor training program to become, back then it was called a certified alcoholism and drug abuse counselor, KDAC.
Yeah, that's right.
And it eventually becomes a LCDC, a licensed chemical dependency counselor.
Right. So there you are. You're in a facility in Houston, and didn't they shut down, like turn the lights off? Everybody, like it was a weird deal, right?
Well, that was after when I was working at a treatment facility for 5+ years in Katy, Texas, called Parkside. And sure enough, we were there on a Monday, and they came in. The regional vice president came in and said, "Hey, we're closing. We want everybody out by Wednesday." And so it was a very powerful experience because we had 20, 30 patients. It was like craziest thing you can experience. And so the Tuesday night, I did a ceremony with the patients. And then the Wednesday, we all had like a lunch with the staff and got to grieve and talk about, us closing and, breaking up the team basically. Because when you're in a treatment environment as a staff, you really want to create a team-like culture. And so it was a sad day that day we closed, and it ended up leading me to get to the right step. So, sometimes God closes one door and opens another door, and it worked out in my favor for sure.
It was absolutely, as a physician in medical school and even residency and talking to doctors in private practice, managed care, not exactly a friendly conversation. Like they're usually held as the enemy. And so when George, when I came to work for you, I think in the first week, you took me to one of the big managed care. I think it was United. It was like just this huge building. And I feel like I'm going to war. I'm going into the enemy's turf. And we walk in this huge room, lots of cubicles where, they have all the phone staff answering phones. George walks in and somebody pops their head up sort of like a groundhog, or what are those little like prairie dogs. And then another one pops up. They're like, George, and he's hugging everybody. And I have this confusion going on. Like, how is he sleeping with the enemy? No offense, right? But not literally. It just seems so odd. And then, absolutely. I think your ability to confront people in an honest way that doesn't cause them defensiveness is also shown up in a positive way in the community. Yes, it was a business situation, but I would like to turn now the conversation a little bit to what else you do for the community. And maybe this is going to mean talking about Common Bond, which is that, look, if you haven't had Common Bond food, you don't know what you're missing. I mean, from the macarons to God knows what else. These like awesome strawberry croissants. Is that right? A strawberry or some kind of red?
Yeah.
Just so good.
Pistachio is my favorite.
I took my son there for breakfast. I don't know what we had. It was so delicious. So talk tell the listeners what your role is there and about the baguettes and the giveaway.
Oh, the challenge. Okay. Well, I like what you said. I appreciate what you said about the managed care companies, because back in the transition of that was probably in the, what year was that? Probably 90s. Insurance companies, for many people that were treatment providers, they did start to become the enemy, because for so long they had like a treatment facilities pretty much had whatever they wanted to get treatment. Like they had these psych hospitals. If the person had $1 million policy, they would stay there until the $1 million was run up. And so the thing about capitalism and healthcare is that greed can be on any side of things. And it's how you manage that greed to get the person the help they need. And so I always felt like insurance companies have an ethical responsibility to treat people with addiction. They don't always know how to do it. They more look at numbers versus lives. And so for us as a provider, I think it's always important to educate them that, hey, by providing this treatment long term, you will save money from them having liver transplants or, going in the emergency room from car accidents. And the actual cost of treatment is very low compared to the things that potentially could happen. And unfortunately, in our society, we don't always think about avoiding more pain by doing prevention. Kind of like the pandemic. If we have done more work up front, we could be saving these trillions of dollars that we're trying to spend to play catch up. And now that the pandemic's out of control. So, currently now, obviously we have, after I sold the Right Step, I couldn't work in the drug and alcohol rehab field for 4.5 years. It was just part of the requirement of selling. And so in that meantime, I found this restaurant that was one restaurant and needed some help, but it had a great reputation as far as the quality of the food, but business wise, it needed some help. And so it had been open maybe a year and a half, and I ended up buying it. And I'd never been there before. I met the chef, and he was telling me his financial issues and issues with his partners, and so that led to me buying the restaurant. And our work is so delicate, like you said, the macaroons, the croissants, we have food as well, savory, but the bakery items are so delicate and take so much work and really artists to put this together. And so we created a commissary. And when you create a commissary to produce the work off-site, you have to have more restaurants. And that's why we're in the growth phase of Common Bond by adding locations. And like I said, we have three that are, one's about to open on May 18th. and then one in June and one in July. It just happened to work out that way. It takes sometimes a year plus to work on these things.
Yeah, so let me interrupt you there because some of the listeners are going to say, hey, right now, our gross national product is down 5% in the first quarter or the first 3 months. You must be out of your mind. You're in the food industry, which is taking a colossal hit. Like, what in the world is possessing you to do this?
Yeah. Well, just, it's the cycle of companies. It just, you never know where your cycle is. And obviously I was in a growth mode, and, this pandemic hit. So you have to work as hard. I've worked probably hardest since the pandemic to think about how to survive, because we have a couple hundred employees that we kept employed through this process, and we were doing takeout and delivery. And then today, like you said, Governor Albert allowed us to have 25% of the dining room is allowed. And even that, it's controversial because people are like, you shouldn't be doing this. And, and it's like, do you do it because people want you to open? Some people don't want you to open. We were open for takeout and for and delivery. And so, I'm looking at these employees and, wanting to do what's right. So it's been an interesting time in our world to try to think of things that never happened before. You have no reference to go back to, like, hey, what happened the last pandemic? Did you open at 25% of your dining room, or, you're taking your chances. So, the thing that I've noticed with this process, one is our sales got hammered. The day that we closed our dining room, sales went down to 70, lost 70% of your sales. So you have to work hard to build it back up. And we have done a great job building it back up. We had signed with Uber. We were only with Favor. We signed up with Uber Eats. Now we're with Grubhub, DoorDash, online sales. So, it's really sustained us to build back up. The fine dining restaurants are the ones that get hammered the most, because you don't think about ordering a $50 steak and take it home, but you could, you pick up a ham and cheese baguette or, flatbread mushroom pizza. It's easy to go pick it up or call Grubhub or go online and get Uber Eats. But
let me interrupt you real quick right there, because some of our viewers may not know this. I'm kind of a history buff, and this made me really study the Spanish flu more. I guess the last pandemic, and it was just the flu. It was a really bad strain of it. And the only reason it was called the Spanish flu was because this pandemic was horrible. Started in, I think, Kansas in the United States, in one of the barracks that was training people to go to World War I. And it, of course, traveled with them. And then it sort of wiped out 50 million people worldwide. If you compare that to, I think, we're up to like 2.3 million deaths, 1 million deaths
it's 60,000 in the U.S.
63,000 deaths in the United States, but 233,000 deaths. If you compare, even like conservative estimates of the Spanish flu is like 10 million, but people think it's somewhere like closer to 50. You see that what we've done, even though it's been horrible financially, it could have been a lot worse. People say that the World Health Organization or China or whatever did a really bad job. Well, yes, I think it's human nature to maybe try to keep things under wraps until you can't anymore. Not that I'm excusing it. It's not right. However, they kept it under wraps. We, as a planet, we kept it under wraps to the degree of 50 million. Yeah. And so I think things are going to get better. We will recover. Yeah. And yes, so it's not so crazy what you're doing. But viewers, I think listeners should hear that you're not just rolling the dice, but you're giving back. Tell us about your baguette thing.
Yeah, so we figured first thing we wanted to help the hospitals and people that were treating the COVID. So we provided food to Methodist Hospital, and then everybody seemed to jump on that bandwagon.
Sure, free food. Why not?
Yeah, Feed the Front Line is a group that's doing a lot of that in the medical center. We've done a few things, but then it went to what's next. And what's next is that with the unemployment, with the oil going down to $15, $12 a barrel, whatever it is, the food bank. And so one of our best selling things we have is our bread, so our baguettes. And so I saw somewhere in Austin where a bakery was doing this, and I said, well, we got to do this. And so we're doing this 10,000 baguette challenge, and we're at almost close to 8,000. We paid for the first 2,000 of it, and then the public buys them at $3 a pop. and then we go deliver them. So on Mondays, we deliver to the food bank. On Tuesday, we deliver to Salvation Army City of Houston homeless program. On Wednesday, it's called Brighter Bites, which is connected with the YMCA, and that's over on Addicts Clothing. And then on Thursdays, we deliver to kids' meals. And so we're delivering about 1,300 baguettes a week. We want to continue that till we get to our 10,000. And we want to keep raising money to get to 10,000. So like I said, we're at 8,000. I feel like I overdid myself, extended my commitment to get to 10,000, but hopefully, God will provide and people will keep supporting the efforts, and we'll do
Absolutely. And for those of you listening that are interested, research is clear on giving helps the giver more than the receiver. So it's scientific that if you want your well-being to go up, be generous, right? Not to the point where you give so much away that you can't fulfill your needs, obviously, but giving benefits the giver more than the recipient.
And it's so powerful. Like we went last Wednesday or Wednesday before last to deliver the first time to Brighter Bites. And normally we were delivering to a warehouse, right? And so this particular time we were meeting in a parking lot of this football stadium, and we drive up and it's like 9:00. We're supposed to, deliver, and we get there and it's lines and lines of cars. We actually have a hard time getting into the parking lot. We have to go through some kind of moving around and get the police to allow us to get through there because they're directed the traffic. And it was so overwhelming that we were an hour before they were starting to distribute, and the cars, it could be 300, 400 cars waiting an hour before. And it was, parking lot was full. The road was blocked with cars waiting in line for this. And so, this pandemic, like you said, lives, we've done a good job saving, less than the Spanish flu. But on the other hand, economically, there's so many people that are challenged. And so food is obviously very essential to people. And to have that many cars in line, it was so powerful. And so one of the things my wife gets concerned anytime I leave the house. And so
good for her.
Yeah, we have a deal that she has to drive me everywhere we go. And so she was driving me to go deliver these breads. At the truck, we were following the Common Bond truck, which is a lot bigger. And so we get there, and, it was so nice because she said, at one time she was in the oil and gas industry. She said, this could be me,
right?
This line. And so I felt grateful that I'm able to work hard and provide, that she didn't have to be in that line asking for food, because it's got to be very humbling to be waiting hours and hours sitting in a car hoping that you'll get the handout of food.
No, absolutely. And that brings up the point of another science of well-being. If you focus on others' happiness more than your own, your well-being goes up. So I know you're an extrovert with a capital E. You like to move, and the fact that you resigned yourself to, okay, I'll let you drive when we go out. Is there's the funny cliche, happy wife, happy life, but you really, man, like it's no wonder you're happier, and I think a lot of people like me who don't have a high happiness set point need to watch and learn about the science and do things like that. And that also allows you to spend more quality time with those you love. That's relationships, positive relationships, that goes up.
I'm still from South Louisiana, so I still got a hard head, but it's a nice thing that I allowed. And it's really been nice because we do get to bond, and she wants our youngest kids. We have 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and our youngest kids that haven't really learned a lot about gratitude because they've gotten so much. But we want to bring them the next time so they could see the magnitude of the people that are hurting out in the world.
You want to take my kids too?
Yeah, you can bring your kids with us. We'll take them.
So I think this is a pretty good time. We're running out of time here, but we'll go over the positive intervention on day 2. And then once George and I process this, just talk about our experience with it, I will let you guys know what's waiting for next week. Yeah. So today's PI was basically apply yourself to making the next right choice for your overall health, happiness, and recovery. Be brave and industrious. Don't quit before the miracle happens. Practice mindfulness about your small choices and remember to smile and hold your body in an upright position. Do the next right thing all day long, and when tired or in doubt, fake it until you make it. At the day's close, journal about your experiences. So for me, yesterday, I actually did this and journaled, and my son right now, we're being quarantined. He loves playing basketball, and I get to actually rebound for him. And, I'm an old guy and I work out, but I'm still, I'm tired. And so we did it once, and then he wanted me to do it after dinner again. And I wanted to say no, because I was very tired, but I said, okay, you know what? The right thing is to support him with an upright posture and not complain and not say anything. So I did. And it was a lot better than the first time that we did it in the day. And it's just great because my son is popular, and he's never here on the weekends. He always gets invited to spend the night out. And the fact that I just get to spend more time with him and I guess experience his personality is such a gift. And it wouldn't have happened if I was a slothed over and really, oh my God, I'm so tired. But, and journaling about it also helps. Journaling is the Swiss Army knife of resilience and well-being, and really helped me put my thoughts, crystallize them and see that what I did was meaningful. And again, so in PERMA, meaning is where you find human happiness, according to Seligman's theory of happiness. So share your experience.
Well, no, I'll be glad to, but I love that example you gave because,
Thanks.
He's very humble, but obviously he's a physician. He deals with people's life and death on a daily basis, very high stress. So the fact that you could spend time with your son to do that is so good. And it's so important. And the same for me is that, there are many times that I've wanted to quit things and in times when it's tough, and I'll use this pandemic as an example. I knew before when it was starting, I knew that things were going to happen, and especially it was going to hit the restaurants and then especially the treatment centers. So we were planning ahead, how to be safer. We were the first ones to have our employees wear a mask before it was even mandated, because it was I became hyper alert to persevere through this, to say, all right, look, what is it that we have to think of next? It's not just what's in the front of you, but what's next, so that you keep making things better and safer going forward. And that's what I think I'm hearing you talk about in those examples, is that at the moment, yes, you want to be totally available, but if you persevere and think about what the next right thing is, it makes things better. I feel good that I had our employees wear a mask. I feel good that we are providing them testing or whatever it is, that to make them feel safe so they can do their job and feel good about their life, and that their company is behind them and worried about their quality of life. And so that to me is the biggest perseverance for me at this time, is when the going gets tough, I get more adrenaline to try to do what I can to help others.
The tough get going.
Yes, tough get going.
So before I read tomorrow, or I guess next week's positive intervention, I'm going to leave you with this request. Would you be willing to come back and maybe co-host a few of these? This has been so much fun.
Of course. I love this stuff. Positive Recovery MD. You're one of my role models, and I want to support this effort and this podcast, and getting the word out. If we can reach people and make somebody's quality of life better, then that's what we're on earth to do, right?
Right. And if you're hungry, go eat at Common Bond. You could do a lot worse. Right?
That helps.
So next week's positive intervention is for the next 3 nights. So start this 3 days before if you want to sort of be able to process as we go along, or you can even call in or email at jason.powers@rightstep.com. And
not right step.
Oh, wait.
Back that up.
Automatic pilot.
Julie, throw the penalty flag.
Or email me at jason.powers@positiverecovery.com. So for the next 3 nights, write down 3 good things that happened to you that day. Explain why these good things happened. Discovering why these good things happened is the most important part. Look for qualities in you that contributed, and accept these parts of you that are permanent and pervasive parts of your life. Try not to dismiss the good things as luck. Be optimistic about the why. You will be repeating this exercise throughout the year as its benefits are significant and sustainable. So thank you all. I hope you guys flourish in recovery. Thank you, George. Thank you, producer Julie DeNofa. And I'll talk to you next week. Signing out.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.